Good morning. Welcome once more to Norma Cowie Talks and on my YouTube channel. Today, I'm going to be explaining how I came to understand how thoughts work or your thinking works via the tarot. This is not a class, just my perceptions of what I've gathered over the years. As you know, if you've studied tarot at all, the lower arcana, which has 4 suits, wands, cups, swords, and pentacles, all comprise of 10 basic symbols, numbers 1 to 10, and 4 what we call court cards. Now, what I love about this is that when you understand how the thinking process works, you can really see always how the tarot itself always tells you how to get out of the difficulties you put yourself into. For instance, we always start off with the ace, number 1, and it doesn't matter what suit it is. It's like this one is a thought, so the thought comes out of nowhere, but the thought shows you a goal, as is represented in the symbol as a castle in the background over the river of life, meaning it's not right here. You have to work to go towards that. Excuse me. Now, once you have a thought, then you move into the number 2. And number 2 is a little bit more complicated in the sense of its symbology, but what it shows is that with the new thought coming in, you have to make room as you contemplate it and you think about it and you figure it. So often that means letting go of what the past thoughts have been, because our minds and in the conscious element of ourselves only has a certain amount of room. And so that room has to take, or I need to say, needs to make space for the new thought that's coming in. And so we think it, we contemplate it. Now, the number 3 card talks about how we now need to project it out into the world. One of the elements I've learned through the tarot is how important action is. You cannot just sit down and think, oh, how that's nice. I'd like that to happen. Yes, that would be wonderful. You need to do something. And that is represented all through the symbology. And number 3 shows that, projecting your idea out, doing what you need to do, doing what you need to do to create how that works. And then in number 4, it comes into fruition. You've reached the castle that was in number 1. Everybody is celebrating. Everybody is happy. And number 4 is always solidity and much more grounded. So consequently, it's really about being able to have your thought, contemplate the thought, project the thought, which is action, doing what you need to do, and then receiving the benefits of that. Now, wouldn't that be nice if that was how everything worked? But we're humans. And things don't always work out exactly the way we want. And so number 5 comes in next, saying what begins to happen. Sometimes we will have already created, and now what do we do now? Where do we go now? Because that goal is over. Well, actually, what we probably need to do is create the next goal to work on. But when we look at 5, and the number 5 is always interesting. I'm going to put my hand up for a minute. What I find with the number 5 is like this. 5 goes in 5 different directions. And when I find people who have birth paths with that, and the birth path is your whole birthday added up to the lowest number, I always say make sure your priorities are good, because you've always got all these plans and your plate is full and you get a little overwhelmed. So you really need to be sure exactly what's happening and going on. Now, in the 5 of Wands, what we've got here is 5 wands, which are big long sticks, of course, fighting each other, except one is being held out. And actually, if you look at that, it's being sort of held separate, but ready to enter the fray. Now, this is when your mind gets confused. This is when your mind goes, well, what about this? And maybe that, and perhaps this. And you get like to the point you just don't know what your next action needs to be. You have no idea what it is you're supposed to be doing. All you know is it's going around and around in your head. And you possibly don't even sleep well because you've got so many ideas going on. Now, that is just stating this is what's happening. But as always, the tarot tells you how to get out of it. Number 6. In number 6, there's a man sitting on a horse holding the wand with a laurel wreath of victory on it. He's also got a laurel wreath of victory on his head. And he's got 5 wands, which were fighting, you might say, or in conflict from number 5, all lined up beside him. Now they're walking beside him. Now, what is this telling us? We've got to keep our thoughts straight. We've got to know what our thoughts are. We've got to know our goal. I'm big on goals. What's your goal? I tend to be short-sighted, so I sometimes catch up with my goals and forget to add new ones. So I'm constantly being reminded, what's the next, where do you want to go from here? What do you want to do? Where do you want to go? So the 6 shows that we need to get our thoughts lined up and working in the direction. Now, things take time. There's a whole element, which I love through the tarot too, is that the time factor, how things take time. So as we're going along and on towards our goal, as via the 6, we come to number 7. Number 7 has, as a young man on top of a sort of a hillside. No, it's not very big. It's not a big hill, just a little bit of hill. But the interesting thing, he's got the 7th wand in his hands, but his feet, one is on his feet, one is a shoe and one is a boot. So there's something a little unbalanced with that. But the significant factor is that the 6 symbols from number 6 are marching in front of him. Took me a long time to kind of figure out what this symbol was all about. And then I realized that actually, to me, it's the first level we have of defensiveness, because he's sort of warding off the thoughts. It looks like these thoughts are coming at him, when in fact, they're actually moving in front of him, but he feels like he's being attacked by them. He has a different stance. He's not too sure about that because of the shoes and the boot, but he's standing pretty solid, and he's ready to fend off these other ideas. So in a way, what's beginning is he's beginning to feel he's feeling insecure. It's an insecurity card, really. It's really about feeling insecure and having to defend. In the meantime, number 8 tells us all the ideas that you projected way out here in number 1 and carried through with number 6, etc., are all floating through the air, going to land. In fact, the symbol, the background and the castle, etc., of dreams is all in number 8, but it's in distance. And that's because very often we don't have patience to wait for what we want to land. When everything is in process, when everything is in direction of where it's going and how it is, what really all we have to do is be patient. And of course, not all of us do that. We want it now. We're a now society in lots of ways, although that seems to be changing right now with what's going on. So we're having to wait. We're having to learn patience. We're having to learn to just hang in there while everything is being geared, and that doesn't sound very well, being geared to the point of where these ideas of what you're wanting will land. Now, in number 9, they land. They're all there, 8. Behind a man who's again holding his wand, but he has a bandage on his head. And if we were looking at, again, the defensive symbols, we've gone from insecure to now downright defending our ideas and our constructs. But the ideas have landed. They're here now. So what do we do with them? Are we easy with them, or do we feel we have to hold on to them because in case something happens? The mind is a very, very interesting thing, and we don't talk too much about the subconscious and the conscious and the superconscious anymore, that I've discovered. But I come from that time when we learned lots about that. And I find it's really important to ensure we know what is going into that subconscious, because that's what gets spewed out in thought and as we'll see in the next couple of weeks, feelings and how we respond. And so what ends up happening, when you're defensive like that, when you're stuck, when you're rigid, it is not as much fluidity. And then we go into number 10, which is really another number 1, but it's 10, so it's got 0 beside it. And there's a house, which often we take as the goal, in front. But guess what? He can't see it because he's got so many ideas going on in his head. He's a strong man who's carrying these wands. His head is buried down into the wands, so he can't see. And he's carrying them really, really strangely. Like he's carrying them like this, which means he could fall over any minute, actually. But the biggest thing is he cannot see. Now, this is a worry card. This is a card where you've just got so much going on in your head. You thought you had a lot at number 5. Nowhere near as much as a number 10. There is a lot going on here. The unfortunate thing is you've lost sight of what is going on. The way this man is, he cannot see where he's going. He could pass his goal and not know. That is the importance of being aware of what is happening all the way around. And so even though it sounds quite quick in the way that I've gone through these, because as I said, it's not really a class. It's about letting you know how you're thinking. Like, you have a thought, you contemplate it, you project it, you will achieve it. But on the way, things could happen. You can get confused by overthinking the what ifs and maybes and perhapses and, etc. The key is to keep it straight in your mind, keep the goal in sight, proceed slow and sure in the direction of what you want, and not to get insecure because other people don't agree with you. Now, if anybody out there is listening to this has had anything to do with MLMs, they talk about the dream stealers. They talk about the people when you start an MLM company and you go to talk to your friends about it. The friends go, no, that's not going to work, blah, 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 on and on like that. And you can become a little defensive about that because you believe. And that's what the 7 is talking about. When you go on you might say the reactive or defensive because you feel insecure, especially if you haven't been in the situation very long and it hasn't really, come in where, yes, this is really the way it is, which is more like the 9 symbol. And so it's a matter of having confidence, having patience, and allowing that time to go to create. In number 3, we set out. We do not know how it's going to be, if it's going to be achievable or not at number 3. We just know we're setting it out. We're projecting it. We're doing what needs to be done. We're allowing things to unfold. And number 8 is similar. It's up in the air. We don't know what's going to happen. We have to be patient. It's saying all is in process. I often say to people, just imagine if you're the big computer in the sky having to organize everything. Do you think they can organize everything in a snap of a finger? No, it takes time. Time is your friend. It's one of my little slogans that got me through many things. Time is my friend. There is time, lots of time. And so as we move through that, we don't have to get defensive. We don't have to think, oh my God, what's going to go on? Because then again, what we're doing is we're clouding ourselves. So when everything lands, like in number 10, we're not going to necessarily see it. And we don't want to miss what we've been working for. So that's how we learn how we're thinking. Of course, we need to really stay in numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, but we're human. So we'll end up in 5. Well, we maybe remember 6. We end up in 7 and 9 and 10. Again, patience, knowing that if you think it, and next week we'll talk about the energy we put behind thoughts, you'll know how this all comes together really, really well. Now, in the suit, there are 4 other symbols. Cool court cut, a page, a knight, a queen, and a king. I call these attitudes. These are the attitudes we have. Now, this is where, as a psychological reader, as a reader that is looking at the philosophical area of our lives to make it work, I found these were very, very helpful. So let's just look at these guys for a moment. The page is a younger man, and because this relates to the fire symbol, they have the symbolism. and out of my brain it disappears what it is. The little fire, the fire symbol, it's just gone out of my brain. Sorry about that. It'll come back. Anyways, his tunic is all covered in these symbols, and he has a little red feather, meaning a little bit of knowledge, and he's absorbed in a wand. He's looking at the top part of it. All wands, doesn't matter which suit you look at, except the swords page, are all absorbed in whatever's going on. So he's absorbed in his thinking. He's just caught up in the thought, doesn't see anything else. Dangerous place to be, actually, because our lives are complex and have many areas. But anyway, it just shows that the attitude is getting this really caught up with things. Now, the Knights, to me, depict how we do the energy. What I like about the Knight of Wands is that there's movement. I find movement is really important. And in life, we have to have a flow, as I say. Now, the Knight here, of course, all Knights have their armor on, ready to go. And he's got his tunic, and he's got his wand in his right hand. And right tends to be the more moving hand, the doing hand. He's on a horse. All Knights are on horses. And the gait of the horse is often very important. And he's ready to take off because he's proceeding after his goal. He's going after what he wants, how he wants it to be, where he wants it to go. So he's got movement. Now the Queen of Wands, very different again. The Queen of Wands sits on her throne with lions and sunflowers, again depicting the fire sign. And she sits there, she's got a little cat clasp on her shawl, holding a wand, again in her right hand, but it does not touch the ground. So it's ungrounded. And in between the wand and where she's looking, because she's looking away from the wand, is a black cat. Took me years to figure out what that black cat. I looked up, it said it was the sinister aspect of Venus. I think I have that written in my early tarot books, actually, because I didn't really get it yet. But this is your fear. This is your subconscious fear. And I lived with a symbol for many years. And one of the things I found about it, and the key I actually gave to this card, was getting sidetracked, because she is not looking where her wand is at all. And it's the fear that we have that we don't know is a fear. And what it does is it talks to us in our heads, telling us, don't go that way, you can't do that. Or that's going to be too hard. Who knows what it's going to say? It's going to say something. So what you do is you compromise and you take another path. You do something a little different. I found often that affected my life at a certain period of time. And I was very, very, when I look back, a little bit frustrated with myself because I didn't figure this out. But of course I didn't figure it out because this is how I was. I had carried deep fear that took me years to figure out. Took me years of work doing my transformation stuff to finally get to the real bulk of the main fear that was there. Because when I was wee little, I was actually fearless. And then things happened to me and I became not so sure about that. And that dictated. So you need to watch that little Queen of Wands because she looks fine. But the reality is that black cat is the key. Because that's your fear, that's the anxieties or whatever you have. Now the king, on the other hand, is very different, like all kings. Very strong. Oh, the key that I was looking for the first time was a salamander. How could I forget salamanders? Anyway, the king is sitting on his throne with his wand in front of him on the ground, grounded. His cape, his back of his throne have salamanders. He also has lions also on his throne. He has a lion's on his necklace here. He's crowned with flames. He's ready to go. Oh, I should mention the page, excuse me. The page's flames are on his boots going downward. But anyway, that's just a thought. So he's looking out. Now, there's something that the King of Wands taught me many years ago. I was reading and I was having businessmen coming in and they looked like they should be really successful and they weren't being successful and I couldn't figure it out. So what I do when I can't figure out something, and this card, the King of Wands, kept coming up for them. So I meditate on the card. I talk to it. And what he told me was this. He said he has vision. He can see way down the road, but he also sees every obstacle that comes in the way, every obstacle that could, perhaps happen. So he's a procrastinator. That's one way. The second way is he has a lot of internal thought going on, and a lot of it is not what we would call today as I call it what you don't want. It's what you don't want to be thinking, like maybe I can't do this, I don't know enough, that second obstacle is going to do me out, I don't know how to handle that. Of course you don't, because you're not there yet. So consequently, when I see people that have this King of Wands that's very significant, I'll say, just know your end result and know the first step, and keep going on what I call the first step principle until you get to that obstacle. You may not get to it. You may walk around it. But if you're there, you've already got knowledge of how to deal with that. So you could say both this Queen and the King of Wands are slightly impeded. One through fear and one through overthinking, although it doesn't look like it. And so this whole symbolism of knowing how your thinking and thoughts work, and it's one of the things I find with a lot of people, that they have, based on the symbology they have and how it works, you can tell if things are going to flow easily or not. And when your mind isn't quite where it needs to be in relation to the end result, the goal that you want, and as I said, going one step at a time towards there, very much like the 6 and the Knight, doing what you got to do, you'll be successful. So the thought of today is what you're thinking. Create your observer if you haven't already. Know that the thinking pattern is consistent. It's happening all the time, whether you're aware of it or not. I talk, as I said, about the subconscious. The subconscious is throwing out thoughts all the time, and if you give them any energy, it will come back. So you've got to be really clear on how you're thinking, what the thinking is saying, what the thinking is working, and what it's doing. And so until next week of Norma Thoughts, you can think about the thoughts, because we're going to be looking and examining next week on the emotions of us and what the cup symbols tell us about that. So in the meantime, I want to thank you for watching this. I want to thank you if you've subscribed. I really appreciate that. If you need, you can always leave a comment. They do get that. I do receive those, which is lovely. But if you want to contact me privately, you can always contact me through my website, www.normacowie.com. I really appreciate you. I thank you. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks.